I just don't want you to embarrass her again, Dad. That's what Petra said, right there in front of the entrance to the auditorium. Parents were walking in with flowers and cameras. Music was already playing inside. I had driven 11 hours by train the day before, stayed in a motel that smelled like stale smoke and loneliness, and bought a new suit because Mark said it looked dignified. But all it took was that one sentence. Petra wasn't even looking at me properly, just adjusting her scarf, shifting from foot to foot like she was embarrassed to be seen with me already. You know how these events are, she added. Like I did know, like I was the kind of man who made a scene. Eva wants this to be her day surrounded by her friends. Let's not make it about you. I didn't ask questions, didn't beg, didn't say what I wanted to say, which was, I built you. I sat in emergency rooms with you. I wrote the checks that paid for the day. I just nodded, that small, defeated kind of nod people give when they're too tired to fight. And I turned around, my dress shoes scuffed back toward the parking lot where my rented Corolla waited. I didn't even know if Eva had seen me. I doubt it. She was likely backstage with her friends, adjusting her gown, smiling for someone else's camera. I wonder if she even knew I'd come, or if she'd told Petra not to invite me in the first place. Back in the bar, I sat for a long time, not crying, just breathing. I put the envelope with the check back into my briefcase. $90,000, a college fund I'd been growing for 13 years. Not because anyone asked me to, but because that's what you do, isn't it? That's what grandfathers do. They think ahead, they save what they can. They picture someone else's future brighter than their own. The motel room hadn't improved overnight. The stale smoke still lingered. I hung the suit back on the hanger, smoothed its shoulders, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the blank screen of the TV. There was a knock at the door at 8:32 p.m. room service. I hadn't ordered anything. The boy standing there wore the same burgundy uniform as the others. He held a small cardboard box with congratulations written on the side in glitter. Cupcakes, probably meant for another guest. Sorry, I said. He looked confused. You're not room 207. I'm 209. Oh, my bad. He looked down at the box, then back at me. You want them anyway? They'll just throw them out. I took the box, not because I wanted cupcakes, because I needed to hold something. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. Thought about Eva as a baby. I used to fix her cradle with my own hands. She had colic. Petra never had time for the midnight feedings. She always said she had early meetings. It was always me who stayed up, me who drove her to speech therapy, me who paid for that new retainer, me who showed up to the parent-teacher conferences when Petra couldn't get out of work. I wonder when I stopped being seen, or maybe I was never seen. Maybe I was just useful until I became inconvenient. In the morning, I woke up at 5:47. No alarm needed. Old men don't sleep much. We rise when the body says so. I dressed quietly, pulled my suitcase to the car, and started the engine. Wilmington was still dark, the sun barely scratching the sky. I made one stop, a FedEx office near the interstate, empty except for a man behind the counter with headphones on. I asked for an envelope, slipped the check inside, wrote "Return to Trust" on the front. It felt final, like drawing a curtain on a play no one stayed to watch. By noon, I was home again. Same white porch, same uneven tiles in the walkway. I left the suitcase inside and poured myself a cup of instant coffee, the cheap kind. It tasted like routine. The phone buzzed around 1 p.m., a text from Mark. Did you make it to Eva's ceremony? I hope she gave you the seat I asked Petra to save. I stared at the message, typed, erased, typed again, then finally sent. I turned around at the door, but I returned the gift. Someone else will need it more. Mark didn't respond for a while. When he did, it was just one line. I'm coming over. I looked at the clock, 1:07 p.m. I didn't get up. I didn't clean the living room or straighten the pillows. Let the house look like it always does. Quiet, lived in, honest. There was nothing left to perform. Mark arrived without knocking. He never knocks, just lets himself in like he used to when he was 12. And I was the only place he could go without pretending to be someone else. "Grandpa," he said quietly, standing in the doorway with his backpack sliding off one shoulder. "You okay?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure what that word meant anymore. Mark sat down at the kitchen table and looked around like the room was trying to tell him something. Maybe it was. Maybe the quiet, the bare countertops, the one unwashed mug in the sink. Maybe it all whispered what I didn't say out loud. "I should have known," he said. "Mom wouldn't have saved a seat. She never does." I didn't want to talk about Petra. Not yet. Not while my body still felt like it had been hollowed out from the inside. Instead, I asked if he wanted tea. He said yes. I made it the old way. Kettle on the stove, not the microwave. He waited in silence. That was one thing about Mark. He knew how to sit still, how not to fill silence with noise. When I handed him the cup, he took it with both hands like he always did. "Was Eva happy at least?" he asked. "I wouldn't know," I answered. "I didn't see her." His brow furrowed. "You mean you didn't go in at all?" I shook my head. "Your mother met me out front, asked me not to come in, said it might embarrass Eva." Mark inhaled sharply like the words had punched him. "Embarrass her for what?" "For being loved." "She didn't want a scene," I said, trying to sound reasonable, even though every syllable scratched at my throat. "She said Eva wanted it to be her day." Mark pushed the cup away and stared at the window above the sink. "You didn't even give her the check." "I mailed it back," I said. "To the trust account." He looked at me. "You really did?" I nodded. "Someone else will use it. Someone who still thinks kindness is a privilege, not a nuisance." We sat like that for a while, the old clock ticking behind us, his knuckles white around the edge of the table. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "For them." "You're not them," I said simply. His eyes softened. "Do you want me to talk to Mom?" "No, but no, Mark." I looked at him. "Then this isn't a misunderstanding. This isn't something she'll explain later. This is who she is now. She's made it clear." I stood up, walked to the drawer where I keep the file folders, took out the one labeled Petra. It was thick, uneven with documents. I laid it on the table. Mark watched me open it and start sorting. I pulled out the receipts, the car loan I co-signed, the payments for the private school, the time I covered her mortgage for 2 months, checks, emails, bank transfers, 17 years of quiet help. "She's been ashamed of me for a long time," I said. "The business, the neighborhood, the way I talk. Everything about me reminded her where she came from. Grandpa, I used to think it would pass, that it was just the people she surrounded herself with. But you know what?" I looked him in the eye. "It wasn't them. It was her. Always was." He reached over and placed his hand over mine. "It's not your fault she turned out that way." I didn't answer, just looked down at the paper trail of a lifetime. Every line a yes I gave when I should have paused. Every dollar a vote of confidence she never asked for, never thanked me for. "I want to change the trust," I said. "Put your name on it." Mark blinked. "What?" "You'll need a co-signer until you're 25, but I'll get the paper started." The fund was meant for a future. I still believe in futures, just not the one I thought. He didn't say anything for a long while, just nodded once and his fingers tightened around mine. Later that day after he left, I sat alone in the living room. The sun came in warm through the curtains, painting slow stripes across the floor. I thought about the graduation stage, about Eva in her gown, her tassel swinging, about how she might tell people her grandfather was too old to travel or too ill, or maybe not mention me at all. That's what people do when they erase someone. They start by leaving them out of the stories. I'm not angry, but I'm not forgotten either. The morning after Mark left, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow pad of paper and a pen that had run dry halfway through a grocery list 2 years ago. I replaced it with one from the junk drawer, the kind with a real weight in your hand. It felt right for what I had to do. The top line I wrote in slow, steady letters. To First Southeastern Trust and Holdings. Termination and reassignment of college fund account 7884LM. Then I stopped. It's strange how your hand can tremble more writing one truth than lifting a load of lumber. I'd written thousands of things in my life. Checks, supply orders, condolence notes. But this was different. This was me declaring the end of something, the end of the benefit of the doubt. I picked up the pen again. Effective immediately, I am terminating all authorizations for disbursement related to Ms. Eva Murray's college expenses from trust account 7884LM. Funds are to remain frozen until reassignment. New beneficiary information to follow. Do not inform the current assignees until transition paperwork is complete. I read it twice. Clear, legal, cold maybe, but necessary. After printing the letter and placing it in an envelope, I slipped it into my briefcase. I would take it to the post office later. But first, I needed to make a call. The banker, his name was Jules, answered on the second ring. "Mr. Murray," he said, cheerful as always. "I was just reviewing some quarterly summaries when your name crossed my—" "I'm reallocating the fund," I said. "No time for pleasantries." He hesitated. "Of course. May I ask the reason?" "You may not," I said. "The decision's made. I'll be naming a new beneficiary, my grandson Mark." There was another pause. This one more careful. "Understood. I'll initiate the paperwork from our side. You'll receive the forms via DocuSign later today." I thanked him and hung up. Then I went to the drawer next to the stove, the one with the elastic bands and birthday candles, and pulled out the envelope that still held Eva's check. I opened it one last time, looked at my own handwriting. Pay to the order of Eva R. Murray, amount $90,000 I'd written that on her 17th birthday. Folded it once, placed it inside a navy blue envelope with a silver lining. Now I tore it in half, then in quarters, then again. It didn't feel good, but it felt real. That afternoon, I walked to the mailbox. The sky was pale and cold, even though the calendar claimed it was June. I dropped the envelope in, walked back slowly. I noticed the neighbor's lilac bush had finally bloomed. Inside the house, I pulled out the manila folder marked legal. I hadn't opened it since 2015 when I updated my will after the workshop was sold. I had divided the assets evenly between Petra and Mark. It felt fair at the time, but life isn't about being fair. It's about being honest. So I called my lawyer. Mr. Murray, he said warmly, I haven't heard from you in a while. I need to change the will, I said, and I'd like to set up a restricted use scholarship fund, private, confidential. You handle trusts, he whistled. Yes, sir, I do. We set an appointment for Friday. That night, I sat in my chair by the window, the one with the uneven leg. I thought about Eva. I thought about Petra. I thought about what it meant to love someone who sees you as nothing but a smudge on the glass of their life. People tell you they'll come around, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just keep walking, and sometimes you have to stop leaving the porch light on. The next morning, I woke early and poured myself a cup of lukewarm coffee from yesterday's pot. I didn't bother heating it. I sat at the table, sipping slowly, staring at the stack of folders I had pulled from the filing cabinet. This one was labeled Petra 2004 to present. It started with a $5,000 check marked business loan startup idea. I remember writing that check. She had been so confident, waving her pitch deck at me like it was the golden ticket. Dad, it's a real opportunity, not one of those scams. 6 months later, the LLC was dissolved. I never asked about it. Then there was the check for the down payment on her first home, $28,000. She and Colin were newly married then, and she said it would mean the world to have a place that was really theirs. We'll pay you back within 2 years, Colin had said, clutching my hands like a son. They never paid a cent. Next, summer camp for Eva when she was 9. $3,200. We're stretched thin, Petra said. You know how expensive these things are. I did, but I also knew how it felt to be a kid left out. So I wrote the check, private high school tuition for Eva, $15,000 a year, 4 years. I covered 2.5 after Petra lost her bonus at work. She told me she'd make it up to me. Maybe once you sell the workshop, you'll be free of all this, she said. Funny how I was the one always freeing them. Medical bills, car repairs, a surprise vacation to Hawaii, a family recharge, she called it. She sent me a postcard from that trip. A postcard. Wish you were here, it read. I kept it, taped it inside the folder because some part of me still wanted the proof that they remembered me at all. I flipped further down the stack, found the Christmas cards, handwritten, always late, always signed. Love Petra and Colin and Eva. Never a mention of the gifts I'd sent. Never a phone call to say thank you. Gratitude, I've learned, is loud in children and silent in adults. Or maybe it just stops being spoken when they know you'll give without it. I picked up the last sheet, a Venmo printout from 2 months ago. Petra had requested $300 for school supplies. The note was brief. If you can, things tight. I sent it, no reply, not even a thumbs up. I laid it all out across the table like a forensic scene, paper witnesses to my quiet generosity. I wasn't trying to count the money, though it was a number most people wouldn't ignore. I was trying to see it clearly, trying to understand how it had come to this. It wasn't just the money, it was that I had given all of it while making myself smaller to fit into the margins of their lives. I remembered something Mark said once years ago when he was still a teenager and full of questions about the world. Why do you always say yes, Grandpa? Because when you're not wanted for who you are, you learn to make yourself needed instead. That afternoon, I made a second call to the financial advisor who'd helped me after I sold the workshop. Mr. Murray, she said, cheerful and efficient as ever. It's been a while. I want to review all current standing payments connected to Petra Murray's accounts, I said. You're still listed as guarantor on 2, she replied after a pause. The vehicle lease and a student loan refinance under Eva's name. How much are those per month? $496 for the car, $312 for the loan. Stop them both. There was a pause. Are you sure? Yes, I said. Make the calls. Begin the process. She promised to send the termination forms by the next morning. When I hung up, my hand hovered over the receiver. I half expected the phone to ring immediately. Petra calling to ask why her payments had bounced, but it stayed silent. Funny how silence can hurt more than shouting. I got up and turned on the radio. Something old was playing. Hank Williams, maybe. The kind of music my father used to hum when he worked on the truck on Sundays. The kind of music that made you feel like your whole life was already behind you. But not today. Today I stood a little taller. There's a drawer in my hallway I hadn't opened in years. Not the junk one, everyone has that, but the deep one under the linen stack where I kept the old ledger books from the workshop. I pulled it open slowly, the wood groaning like it too had something to say. I ran my fingers across the spines. Inventory 1989, payroll 1996, tax receipts 2002. And then in faded ink on a blue cover, orders, family discounts. That was my own shorthand. Pages and pages of free labor notations, half-priced custom furniture, unbilled repair deliveries. Most people didn't know the workshop had stayed afloat in its early years, only because I didn't charge folks who couldn't afford it. I'd give them a receipt anyway, not for them, but for me. A record that said, this counted, even if it wasn't paid for. I turned the pages slowly. There was Petra's name scattered like dandelion seeds. Birthday rocking horse, Eva, age 40. Office baby shower custom shelving. Colin's coworker, $0. Custom garden bench, 5 Thanksgiving family, $0. It had been my way of showing love. Not big speeches, not smothering hugs, just, I'll build for you, I'll support your bomb, I'll be in the background of your happiness, holding the blueprint. I closed the book and rested my hand on top of it. The workshop had been our life, Alara's and mine, before everything fell apart. She died the way people in small towns do, suddenly, without fanfare. A heart attack in the passenger seat on the way home from a supply run. Petra was 27 then, Eva just a toddler. I remember the funeral mostly in pieces, white flowers wilting in the heat, the minister mispronouncing Alara's name, Petra telling the guests not to worry about me, that I'd be fine. What they didn't know, I opened the workshop the next day. Couldn't afford to close. I sanded wood with tears in my eyes and talked to customers with a smile I didn't mean. People were kind for a week. Then they stopped asking how I was. Then they just ordered their usual. But the work kept me moving, kept me breathing. Over the next decade, I turned the place into something more. Hired 2 people from the shelter, installed new machinery, got us on a local list of 10 small businesses to watch. I even won a ribbon for a hand-carved birdhouse at the county fair. Not because it was perfect, but because I was the only one still building by hand. I didn't take vacations, I didn't buy new clothes, but I saved slowly, quietly. And when I sold the place, I made enough to live simply and help the family. What I didn't expect was that the more I helped, the less I was seen. Petra once told someone at a party that I used to putter around in a workshop before retirement. Used to. I remember Mark catching my eye across the room when she said that. He never said a word, but he didn't laugh either. Now, years later, I stood in my kitchen thinking, if I could rebuild a business from the ashes of grief, I could rebuild a life from the ashes of disappointment. And maybe, just maybe, I could use what I still had, the quiet strength, the leftover love, even the money, to help someone who needed it. Someone who hadn't already decided I was past my usefulness. I pulled out a blank notepad and wrote 3 words at the top. Scholarship. First gen. See, I didn't know who they would be yet, but I knew they existed. Young men and women who reminded me of the boy I once was. Scrappy, scared, but still believing in tomorrow. That's who the fund would be for. Not out of spite, not as revenge, as hope. For someone else's story to turn out better. The call came just after dinner. Not the kind of dinner with napkins or candles, just soup from a can and a biscuit I defrosted. I was rinsing the bowl when the phone rang, and for some reason I dried my hands slowly before answering. It was Eva. Grandpa? Her voice was softer than I remembered, or maybe it was just the distance in it. Yes, kid, I said. It came out gentler than I meant. I just wanted to check in. Mark said you were in town. I closed my eyes for a moment, so she knew I was. There was a pause. I didn't see you at the ceremony. I turned around at the door. Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear her piecing it together. Did something happen with Mom? I sat down slowly, the phone cradled between my shoulder and cheek. She asked me not to come in. Silence then. Oh, just that one syllable weighted with something she probably didn't have words for. Shame? Confusion? I couldn't tell. I didn't know, she said after a moment. I assumed you didn't want to make the trip. I made it 11 hours by train. She exhaled audibly. I'm sorry, don't be. I looked out the window at the porch, light flickering against the evening. You had a good day? It was fine, she said too quickly. A little overwhelming. They rented out this hall, photographers, speeches. Mom got emotional. I think she's been planning it for months. I could hear her trying to steer the conversation, to patch the hole. I let her. I didn't want to guilt her. That wasn't the point of this call. Mark said you mailed something back. She said, quieter now. I did. What was it? I hesitated, then told the truth. Your college fund. Another pause. Oh, she said again. Not the same oh as before. This one was heavier. I set it up when you were 5, I said. Every month. Even when the workshop was slow. Even when I was tired. I didn't know, she said. I know. She cleared her throat. Are you angry? No, I said, and I meant it. Just done pretending. She was silent again. Then slowly, Mom's always been particular. That's one word for it. She says she didn't mean it like that she was just trying to make sure things went smoothly. Do you think that justifies what she said? No, I've admitted, but I think she's scared of what? Of not being enough. I closed my eyes, and I'm the reminder of where she came from. I don't think that's fair. It's not, I agreed, but it's true. There was another long stretch of silence between us, the kind that only exists between people who still care, even if they don't know what to do with that care. I wish you'd come in, she said finally. I would have wanted you there. That means something, I said, more than you know. I don't want your help because of guilt. You won't get it either way, I said gently. It's no longer yours. She didn't argue, didn't plead, and that strangely made me feel a little sadder, as if she'd already accepted I was stepping out of the picture. Mark said, you're starting a scholarship fund. I am, that's really great. I hope someone good gets it. They will, I said. They'll write their own story. Maybe it'll be better than ours. She didn't speak again for a while. Then she said very quietly, I'm sorry, Grandpa, for not knowing, for not asking. I forgive you, I said, but it's your turn to do the work now. I meant more than she probably realized. Okay, she whispered. We said goodbye. I hung up the phone and placed it gently on the table. Outside, the wind had picked up. The trees swayed like they were listening too. I didn't cry, not out of strength, but because the grief had finally made space for something else. Clarity. Jules called the next morning. True to his word, the documents were ready. I opened the email, scanned the headers, and began signing. It took 12 clicks to legally remove Petra Murray and Eva Murray from any present or future access to the trust. 12 clicks or 18 years of quiet sacrifice. After the last digital signature, I sat back and exhaled. Not from exhaustion, from relief. At 11:15 a.m., I got into my car and drove to the bank. There were some things I didn't want to do through a screen. Some moments deserved to be witnessed in person. The teller recognized me. Mr. Murray, haven't seen you in a bit. I'd like to speak with Jules, please, privately. She buzzed him. I was escorted into a quiet glass office with a potted plant in the corner and the soft sound of jazz playing overhead. Jules smiled in that polite, professional way. Everything went through just fine. We'll finalize the reassignment once you file Mark's consent and ID. I also want to create something new, I said, a scholarship fund. He raised his eyebrows but didn't comment, just clicked a few tabs open on his computer. Tell me more. Private, I said, anonymous. I want full discretion, not tied to the family name. Understood. For first-generation college students, preference for working-class kids, someone who's earned every inch of their future the hard way. How much would you like to allocate? Let's start with $100,000 with room to grow. He nodded slowly, typing it in. We can set that up as a managed charitable trust. You'll stay in full control of the selection process. Good, I said. I'd like that. He printed a preliminary form and slid it across the desk. You're sure about the anonymity? I want to be known only to the recipient and only if I choose to write. Jules nodded. That can be arranged. After signing the initial documents, I left with a copy of the draft agreement and a strange lightness in my chest. Not joy, that would be too strong a word, but something close, like I had unclenched a fist I'd been holding for too many years. At home, I opened a folder on my desktop and created a new document, Scholarship Fund, Guidelines and Intentions. I typed slowly, carefully. This fund is intended for a young person who has been overlooked, underestimated, or simply unsupported. Someone who reminds me that worth is not inherited, but earned, and that kindness doesn't need an audience to matter. This is not a reward, it's an act of belief, quiet, unconditional belief. I saved the document. Then I sat at the kitchen table and poured myself a glass of water. No celebration, no toast, just a long look out the window, where the light was changing on the trees. For most of my life, I had been a background character in other people's stories, supportive, present, mostly silent. Now finally I had a story that belonged to me. Friday morning came bright and cold with the kind of wind that makes you second guess everything. Your coat, your shoes, your decisions. I wore my gray wool jacket, the one I'd had for years. It still fit, still held its shape like I did. The lawyer's office was downtown, not in a high-rise, just a quiet, narrow building tucked between a bookstore and a dental clinic. The kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you were looking. Francis welcomed me with that same calm smile he'd had since Alara and I first used his services to buy our house in '79. A little more stooped now, his beard a bit whiter, but still sharp behind the eyes. "Edgar," he said, rising from his desk. "You look well." "I look like someone who's finally had enough," I said, sitting across from him. He chuckled. "That's something to be proud of. We didn't waste time." I handed him the envelope with the documents I'd prepared. Trust reassignment, charitable intent letter, the list of standing payments I wanted revoked. He read through them silently, nodding here and there. "Clean," he said finally. "You've done most of the heavy lifting. I've had time to think and to grieve." I didn't answer that, not directly, just said it doesn't feel like grief. It feels like clarity. He opened my old will, a printed copy I hadn't seen since Alara passed, and began marking sections with a red pen. "You want to remove Petra as primary beneficiary? I want her removed entirely." Francis looked up. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Do you want to leave a note for the record? Some explanation for your heirs?" "I've left enough explanations in my life. They can make up their own stories if they need to." He nodded. "What about Eva?" I paused. That name still had weight, still lingered in the room longer than I wanted it to. "No direct inheritance." I said she's a grown woman now. If she wants a future, she can build it. And Mark, he gets everything. If he wants it, if not, let it go to the scholarship trust. Francis jotted that down. "I'll draft an updated will today. You can sign next week. I'd like it notarized before the end of the month." "Planning something?" "Just cleaning house." We spent another 30 minutes going over details. Emergency contacts, healthcare proxy, burial instructions. Simple, no service, cremation. I wanted nothing extravagant, no performances. When we were done, Francis closed the folder and looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "Edgar," he said, voice lower now, "I've known you a long time. You've always done everything for everyone else." I didn't reply. It's all right to do something just for yourself. Even now, especially now. I gave him a tired smile. That's what I'm doing. As I left the office, I saw my reflection in the glass door. Wrinkles, yes, tired eyes, but also something else. Something firmer in the line of my mouth. I didn't look like a man unraveling. I looked like a man deciding. Mark came over that Sunday with a grocery bag in one arm and a tired kind of energy in his face. He didn't say much at first, just set the bag down on the counter, started unpacking. "Granola," he said, holding up a box. "You still eat this kind?" I nodded, "When I remember to." "And tea, the peppermint one you like, and apples." They were on sale, but I picked the ones that felt firm. I watched him move, how he made himself smaller in the kitchen, respectful of space that wasn't his, but had once been his refuge. "You didn't need to bring anything," I said. He looked up. I did. We sat in the living room, both with mugs, though neither of us drank much. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just dense, like we both had things waiting in our throats. He was the first to speak. "Mom's called me 3 times, left a voicemail yesterday, asked if I knew what was going on." I didn't respond, I didn't answer. Still, I stayed quiet. "She knows something's shifted. Ava probably told her about the call you two had. Let her wonder," I said. Mark tilted his head. "She won't wonder long. You know her." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm preparing." He raised an eyebrow. "Preparing for what? For the storm? For the begging? For the bargaining?" Mark smiled a little. "You really think she'll beg?" "No," I said, "but she'll perform like she is. There's a difference." He looked down at his tea. "You know, when I was 12, I told Mom I wanted to live with you." I turned to him, startled. "You never told me that?" She said no, said it would confuse things, said you were too lenient. My throat tightened. Too lenient? Too willing to forgive? She said too available. I exhaled. "That sounds about right. I didn't understand then," Mark continued. "But now I think she was scared I'd grow up with your voice in my head instead of hers." I reached for his hand. He let me take it. "I'm not doing this to punish anyone," I said quietly. "I'm doing this because I can't carry the weight anymore. Not alone." "I know," he said. "I see that." We sat for a long time after that. No words, just 2 men, 2 generations, both knowing exactly how much silence can hold. When he finally got up to leave, he hugged me. Not quick, not obligatory, a real embrace. At the door, he turned and said, "If she calls, are you going to answer?" I thought for a moment. Maybe, but not right away and not to explain myself. He nodded. Good. Then he left and I stood at the window long after his car disappeared, watching the wind move through the trees like it had something to say. The first voicemail came at 2:14 p.m. Sunday afternoon. I was folding laundry. The phone buzzed twice on the counter and then silence. No name showed on the screen, but I didn't need one. Petra has always used silence like a tool, first waiting to be begged, then pretending to be the bigger woman when the begging never came. I let it go to voicemail. Then the next one came and the next. By the time I finished folding, there were 5 missed calls and 2 voicemails. I sat down on the edge of the bed, pressed play. Dad, it's Petra. I've been trying to reach you. Eva said you talked. I don't know what she said, but I think we should clear the air. I don't want any misunderstandings between us. Call me. I deleted it. The second one started differently. Dad, seriously, this is getting out of hand. I don't know what Mark's told you or what Eva said, but you're making things way more dramatic than they need to be. We're family. You're always welcome. Delete. Monday morning, I woke to 6 more missed calls. One of the voicemails was longer, filled with a kind of desperation that didn't suit her. Look, I made a mistake. Okay, I shouldn't have said what I said outside the ceremony, but it was a tense moment. I was just trying to make sure Eva had the day she wanted. That's all it was. Don't throw everything away over one comment. There it was, the shift from vague politeness to entitlement. Don't throw everything away as if I was the one who had shattered anything. She called again that evening. Dad, the bank contacted me. There's been some kind of stop on the lease account. They said the guarantor withdrew authorization. That's you, right? Of course it was me. I need to talk to you. Please call me. I didn't. The next one was shorter. Dad, this is affecting my credit. I've got things tied to that lease. Eva's loan is linked too. You didn't even warn us. Then the silence grew longer. 2 days passed, no new messages. I assumed she was regrouping, strategizing her next move. Then Thursday night, a text came in. I just don't understand how you could do this to your own family. That was it. Not a question, an accusation. I stared at the message for a long time, the glow of the screen sharp against the dark room. I didn't respond. What was there to say? Everything she needed to understand had already happened. Every missing thank you, every time she chose a clean narrative over a complicated truth, every moment she had the choice to see me and look in past instead. At some point, I stopped hoping she would change and started changing myself. Friday morning, I opened my laptop, wrote a short reply. Just 12 words. You made a choice and now I've made one of my own. Then I powered off the phone entirely. Let her sit with that. Let the silence grow roots. I didn't go into town that week. Didn't pick up the dry cleaning. Didn't attend my veterans club. Didn't even go to church on Sunday. Not out of shame. That had long been burned off. But because I needed the stillness. I needed to hear my own thoughts without Petra's voice in my head. On Tuesday morning, the mail came with a letter from the electric company, a coupon flyer, and a heavy cream envelope with no return address. I opened it carefully, half expecting more legal notifications. Some desperate maneuver from Petra, but it wasn't from her. It was from Eva. The handwriting was neat, slanted slightly to the right, like Alara's used to be. Dear Grandpa, I've been thinking about our conversation a lot and I couldn't leave it where we did. I didn't know about the fund or about how much you've done. That's not an excuse, just the truth. And I want to say thank you, even if it's too late to matter. I don't think Mom meant to hurt you, but I also don't think she understands how she has. Growing up, she made it seem like everything we had just was like it came out of nowhere or from her hard work alone. She rarely mentioned you, not in a mean way, just like you were background noise. I didn't question it until Mark started telling me stories, real ones, about the workshop, about you raising him when he got sick that year, about what you gave up for the rest of us. I'm not writing to fix things. I'm not even sure they can be fixed. But I want you to know that I see it now. I see you. If I end up taking loans, I'll manage. Maybe it's good for me. I need to earn things. But even if you're not in my life the same way anymore, I hope I can still be in yours if you'll have me. With love, Ava. I read it twice, then set it down on the table. My hand stayed resting on top of it like it might blow away if I let go. It didn't change anything. Not the money, not the years, not the quiet erasure I lived through, but it meant something. Sometimes the smallest acknowledgments arrive when you've already stopped waiting. and they don't fix the past, but they lay a gentler brick for what comes next. I didn't reply that day. Instead, I opened the file for the scholarship fund. I'd been reviewing essays from applicants, all anonymous, of course. I wanted to choose based on story alone. One in particular had stayed with me. A girl from Mississippi who worked nights at a diner, wrote poetry on the backs of receipts, and wanted to study education. She didn't beg. She didn't try to impress. She just told the truth. My mom says I'm too gentle to make it in college, she wrote, but I think gentleness is a kind of strength. It means I haven't turned hard even when I could have. That line, it sat inside me like a stone dropped in water. I clicked approve. Then I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a note card. Not formal stationery, just a plain white square I'd used for shopping lists before. I wrote, "Dear recipient, you don't know me, but I see you. Keep going, not because someone's watching, but because you can." Then I signed it, from someone who believes in quiet strength too. It was a Wednesday when I decided to go back to the workshop one last time, not to work. The new owner had taken over 5 years ago and turned it into something sleeker with fancy modern displays and glass-walled offices. They'd kept the name Murray's Forge, but none of the warmth. Still, it was the place where I'd built everything, including the strength I was standing on now. I didn't call ahead, just walked the 10 blocks from my house, wearing the old denim jacket Alara once said made me look like a man who didn't care to be underestimated. The bell over the door still jingled. That sound hadn't changed. The girl behind the counter was young, high school maybe. She smiled at me like I was just another customer. "Can I help you?" "I used to own this place," I said, stepping further inside. Her eyebrows lifted. "You're Mr. Murray." "I am." She smiled wider. "The owner talks about you all the time. Says you're the reason the business has heart." I blinked, surprised. "He says that?" "Yeah. Said you built it with your wife from nothing. That people used to come in not just for custom work, but for comfort." That word landed heavier than she knew. I looked around. The layout was new, the machinery different, but the bones were still mine. The workbench near the back where I used to sit with my ledger, the dent in the floor near the lathe, still there, though now covered by a mat. "Do you want to sit?" the girl asked. I did, and I ordered a cup of coffee and a pastry, even though I knew it wouldn't taste the same. It didn't. Too sweet. But the gesture mattered more than the bite. I sat there for nearly an hour, just watching people come and go, watching the space hold them the way it once held me. That afternoon, back home, I began sorting through my closets. I wasn't preparing to leave. I was preparing to let go. Boxes of old records, receipts, birthday cards, Eva's drawings from when she was 5. One of a princess, one of a lopsided house with Grandpa, written in orange crayon across the top. I kept that one. I found the envelope Petra had sent from Hawaii, the postcard inside. "Wish you were here." I turned it over, held it to the light, then dropped it in the trash. Some things didn't need saving. Late that night, after the dishes were washed and the house was quiet, I sat down and wrote one more letter. Not to the bank, not to the lawyer, just to myself. "Dear Edgar, you did the best you could with what you had. You gave, you stayed, you waited, and now you've chosen something else. Not bitterness, not revenge, but enough. Enough giving, enough silence. You are not someone's second option. You are not someone's backup plan. You are a man who loved deeply and finally decided to love himself too." I folded the note and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. No one else would ever read it, but that wasn't the point. Some truths are just for keeping. The letter came on a Friday, plain envelope, typed address, no return stamp. I opened it without expectation. By now, most mail was utility bills or quiet reminders from the world I'd begun stepping away from. But this was different. It was from the scholarship recipient. Not a form letter, not an obligatory thank you, just a few pages written in blue ink on lined paper, folded twice like someone still believed in the value of care. "Dear Scholarship Committee," or whoever you really are. I don't know what I expected when I applied. Mostly I didn't think I'd hear back. That's how it goes for people like me. We send our names into the world and hope someone doesn't just delete them. But you didn't. You picked me. And now I'm sitting here in a campus library writing to a stranger who changed the direction of my life. Let me tell you who I am. My name is Naya. I grew up in Yazoo City, Mississippi. My mama works in a nursing home and my brother fixes air conditioners when the season's right. We've never had much, but I've always had books. I used to steal minutes in the school library, the way some kids steal cigarettes, hiding in corners, pretending to work, but really just reading everything I could get my hands on. I wrote my first poem at 11. It was about the sound my mama's feet made when she came home at night. Soft, dragging, tired. I didn't show it to anyone. I didn't think people like us had stories that mattered. But I was wrong. This scholarship, it's not just money. It's proof that someone out there read my words and thought, she's worth believing in. I don't know your name, but I know your kindness. I felt it before I knew it existed. And now I carry it with me like armor. I want to become a teacher, not because it's easy, but because I remember what it felt like to be invisible. I want to stand in front of a classroom and say to some quiet kid in the back, I see you, Bow. That's what you've done for me. I see you. Thank you for seeing me. With more gratitude than I can fit in one letter. Nia Thomas, I read it once, then again, and again, until the lines blurred, and the paper softened from where my fingers kept pressing, as if trying to hold on to the weight of what she'd said. I set the letter on the table beside me and sat very still. The house was quiet, not the hollow kind, but the deep kind, the kind that says, this moment is enough. She didn't know me, but somehow she did. She knew what it meant to be overlooked, to be doubted, to be told in 1,000 small ways that your story didn't matter. And she knew the power of being seen just once without condition. That night, I lit a candle, not out of ceremony, but because the light felt right. I placed her letter beside my chair. I didn't respond. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Sometimes the gift is in the receiving, and sometimes the quietest things you do end up echoing the loudest. It was spring again, the kind of spring that comes slow in this part of the country, reluctant, cautious, still wearing winter's coat. But the daffodils had started pushing through the ground near the sidewalk, and that was always the first sign. Nature, stubborn as ever, insisting on another beginning. I went for a walk that morning, not far, just the old loop around the block, past the pharmacy, down toward the creek, then back along the library side wall where the bricks were still warm by noon. I wore my good walking shoes, the ones Mark once called indestructible, and carried nothing but my house key in my coat pocket. Near the old hardware store, I saw him, Reed Cunningham. We went to high school together, sat next to each other in American history, and spent one awkward summer at the same church camp. I hadn't seen him in more than 40 years. He was standing near the bench outside the store, holding a small paper bag. When he saw me, he squinted, then smiled. Edgar, I stopped. Reed, I didn't know you still lived here. I don't. He said moved back 2 years ago after Barbara passed. Thought I'd stay for 6 months. That turned into 12. Now I rent above the pharmacy. I'm sorry about Barbara. He nodded. I was too. But grief's quieter now. You learn how to set the table for one. I sat beside him without asking. That's the thing about old friendships. They don't need invitations. How have you been? He asked after a moment. I've been rethinking some things, I said. He smiled gently. You always did think more than the rest of us. Not more, just longer. We sat there for a while, two old people in coats, too warm for the season, watching cars pass with windows cracked open just a little. I read about your workshop once, he said. It made the state list, something about best craftsmanship in the southern counties. That was a surprise. You still build? Not much. Not for others. He nodded. Sometimes I think about fixing up my old fishing boat. Then I remember how heavy it was and how quiet the lake feels without company. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel erased. I felt present. After a while, he reached into the paper bag, pulled out a small jar, pickled okra, held it up like an offering. Still your favorite? I laughed, and it startled me. You remembered? I remember the people who didn't talk over me. We parted with no promises, no plans, just a wave. But I walked home with something lighter in my chest. That evening, I stowed in the hallway, hand resting on the doorway to the guest room. It used to be Mark's when he was little, then Eva's sometimes, now mostly empty, a catch-all for boxes and folded quilts. But I opened the closet and took out the small suitcase anyway, the one I used for short trips. I dusted it off, set it on the bed, and left it open. Maybe I'd visit someone. Maybe I'd go nowhere, but I'd pack for myself. Later, sitting by the window, I read Naya's letter one more time. Then I wrote one of my own. Just a card. Dear Nia, you don't know my name. That was part of the plan, but I want you to know something. You've reminded me that stories can begin again, even late in the book. You are not alone, and neither am I. With quiet faith, someone who sees you. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. The next day, I mailed it with no return address. Just a small envelope carrying everything I had left to say. And still, somehow, not everything. The last time Petra called, I didn't answer. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. Not anymore. The anger had burned away weeks ago. Slow, steady, like a fire that knows better than to rage. What was left was quieter, stronger, like stone after flame. Instead, I listened to the voicemail in the early evening, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of weak tea and the last of the spring light crawling across the floor. "Dad," her voice began, more tired than before. "I guess you've made your choice. I won't keep bothering you. Just I hope someday you'll talk to me again. For what it's worth, I never stopped appreciating everything you did. I just didn't know how to say it right." That was it. No apologies, no breakthroughs, just a woman trying to close the door she once slammed. I sat with it, not with pain, but with clarity. I had already forgiven her, not for her sake, but for mine, because holding on to that weight was like carrying bags through an airport no one was meeting me at. Some people never understand the hurt they cause, and some understand it too late. But either way, you still get to decide when to set it down. I opened the window to let the air in. It smelled like honeysuckle, like something new. That weekend, Mark came by with a folder under his arm. "What's that?" I asked. He handed it to me, grinning. Photos from the scholarship ceremony. Naya sent them. I opened it slowly, not ready for what I found. A girl in a simple dress standing at a podium, smiling but serious, holding a paper in her hands. Her eyes were bright, her back straight. You could tell she'd earned every minute of that moment. "She mentioned you in her speech," Mark said. "Called you her invisible architect." I laughed low, surprised. "I like that. You built something, Grandpa. You should see it." There were more pictures. Nia shaking hands with the dean, Nia with her mother, both women holding on to each other like the world might tilt. Nia with a small crowd of students, some holding notebooks, some just watching her like they saw something possible in her face. And then tucked in the back, a picture of the card I sent. She'd framed it. "You are not alone and neither am I." I traced the photo with my fingertip. Mark reached for my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. "I'm proud of me too," I said. And it wasn't hard to mean it. We spent the afternoon sorting more photos, sharing old stories. He told me about his job, the promotion he was hoping for, the friend he was thinking of moving in with, the therapy he'd started. And I listened, not as his fixer, not as his fallback, just as someone who'd earned the right to sit still and be heard. When he left, he kissed my cheek and said, "You taught me a lot, Grandpa, more than you know." I stood at the doorway long after he drove off, watching the road until it was quiet again. That night, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I wrote in a journal, just a few lines. "I am not an afterthought. I am not what they discarded. I am the root. I am the hand that held even when no one reached back. And now, finally, I am my own." I slept well. No dreams, no interruptions, just peace. And if you're still here reading this, maybe you felt it too. That's